Hey, it's Ryan, and welcome to my ongoing series on the artistic entrepreneur. Now, my goal here is to reach fellow creatives like you who are actors, singers, filmmakers, improv performers, comedians, and share some advice and some stories about different ways that you can actually use your craft to support your art. And I'll be sharing some of the tools that I've been using to bring in some extra cash that I use to help pay for my voice lessons and some headshots that I have coming up. And I'll also be joined with friends and colleagues in the industry that I've handpicked specifically because they have built parallel professions or have great side hustles that actually utilize the performing arts skills that they've been developing probably their whole lives. And one of the most fulfilling things that we can do in life, I think, is to share our journey and our learned experience and help others along the way, being a good mentor to someone who's just starting off on their journey. So I hope you'll continue to follow along and let me know what you are doing to succeed in your art, both creatively and financially. And I'm so excited to have my dear friend Justin on the show today. Justin is an actor. He's Boston based. He's also a great podcaster. A wonderful singer. And he has a really exciting side hustle, or I think it might even be his full time job. I'll let him explain it to you. But first, welcome to the show, Justin.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about it with you.
Excellent. Um, let's first reveal what the job is that you have. What's the exact term for it? I don't want to mess anything up here.
Yeah, the term that we use is historical interpreter.
A historical
Historical
reinterpreter? Interpreter.
interpreter. So, as an interpreter, I portray real life figures from history in a dramatic, interactive setting.
So go on, go on. Is this you're in Boston, and I've seen some of the costumes you wear. Who are some of the characters you're portraying, and what is the setup? Is it a controlled sort of theater venue, or are you doing walking tours? Give me the whole rundown. I need to know more.
Sure. Well, the specific place of employment I work at is it's restrained. It is a museum in Boston, and I give 75-minute long tours of our museum, and included in that there is lots of opportunities to talk with guests in an interactive setting and to talk a little bit more about the history and the context of certain historical events that have happened in Boston. And it's meant to provide hands on learning, adding insight and context to events that we know about, but don't necessarily know everything about. And so, what I do typically is I give a 50% scripted tour that has been written by me based on my character research. I typically play a character named Nathaniel Frothingham. He is a carriage maker in Boston, and he was in the 1700s. But I've also had the opportunity, depending on the needs of the site, to play characters like John and Sam Adams, Captain Preston, one of the leaders of the Redcoat soldiers, and things like that.
Exciting. And but before we go any further, I just wanted our audience to know what this job is that you do. I want to emphasize that you are still making time to audition and perform and podcast as well. You have a fantastic Wizard of Oz podcast. What's the name of it again?
It's the wonderful recap of Oz. That was a pandemic project that came around just around the same time that I actually started working as an interpreter. And it's probably not the best idea to take on a new full time job and a podcast that you're doing all by yourself at the same time, but it certainly is. There are certainly a lot of outlets that I can express my creativity with.
Well, something that's special about that podcast in particular is that the content is evergreen. It's not based on something very current right now. So even like this video that we're filming, I'm hoping that people will get use out of it for many, many years to come. Actors that are looking for side hustles or looking for other alternative avenues in their career, whatever they might be. I hope that they can find this as a resource. And this Wizard of Oz podcast is really just good information. You've dissected these Oz books by L. Frank Baum and some of the other writers in such detail with such care that it's a wonderful resource for anyone who's looking to dive into the wonderful world of Oz down the road.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. There is, I was not prepared for the amount of material I would find when I was looking into the podcast. I knew, of course, of the MGM movie and of the Return to Oz from the '80s, some of the Wiz Live, things of that nature. But I didn't know a lot of the silent films, so the really early adaptations and stage works based on the books that were even some of them being written by L. Frank Baum himself. So it was interesting to be able to see the relationship between the author and his work and his hand in adapting it, and then also just how it's evolved over the years.
I foresee in your future you portraying L. Frank Baum in a sort of theatrical way and touring it around to libraries and museums perhaps to lecture on the life of Baum and the history of the Wizard of Oz from the time when he was alive into the future beyond what he could have even imagined. I think that might be a fun exploration for you down the road.
That would certainly make a great one man show. So thank you for that idea. I'm going to go ahead and steal
We'll
that.
work on it together. I'm all about one man shows, but
Great.
one of the cool opportunities that you had last summer, I believe, got to blend your love of the Wizard of Oz and your performing skills. Tell me about
Mhm.
that performance opportunity.
Yeah, the show I did was called And Your Little Dog Too. It was a bilingual adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. It was also on your feet. It was interactive, and it took place all outside. And I worked with the Apollinaire Theater Company with Chelsea. It was an original script that they worked on, and it was modified with some more modern themes such as gentrification. Whereas the Wizard of Oz, the message ultimately is there's no place like home. Um, the And Little Dog 2 was more about, well, what if you don't have a home to go home to anymore? And so there was a lot of really, really interesting things that we got to play with there. And of course, the first gig I was able to land in the middle of the pandemic was, of course, Oz related. I just thought that was cosmically, it just seemed like I had to audition for it. And so I was lucky to be able to do that.
That show also seemed really special because it had some bilingual aspects in it too, didn't it? And
Yes, it did.
do you speak any other languages, or were you just mostly speaking in English?
I was mostly speaking in English. I was in the ensemble, so I didn't have much to say in general. The ensemble was a very physical piece of the show, but the main characters all spoke in and out of English and Spanish, and Dorothy and her family were played by Latinx actors, and so we were able to incorporate a lot of the community in Chelsea as well, and so it was really great to work with them in that regard.
Now, I want to switch back to historical interpretation. And when did you first become aware of that this was an employment possibility, and how did you first pursue it?
Mhm. Well, I studied in Boston, and so I had always seen people in their tricorn hats or their beautiful gowns walking up and down the street, doing Freedom Trail tours and things like that. And I never really thought of it as a career path for me when I was in college because I was still figuring out exactly where I wanted to be and what I wanted to be doing. And then I graduated in 2020. So I was given my degree and told your industry's on pause. So I hung around for about a year until a job posting for an actor came my way. And of course, it said actor slash historical interpreter. Interpreter was something I'd never heard of before. I saw the word actor and said, I'm going to apply because this is a full time job technically in my field. And so I applied for the job and I auditioned and I had gotten it within a few weeks. Then I spent an entire month researching the topics that we discuss on the tour, doing research on the people who were involved in certain events, and crafting a character based on that. And from there, that is how I got involved in the interpretation scene. And it's given me opportunities not just to be in Boston. We do a lot of outreach in other towns that, specifically, I work where I work in a setting that I get to visit a lot of cemeteries and I get to honor participants of people who were involved in the Boston Tea Party. And so I get to meet with other historical societies in Massachusetts, even out of Massachusetts, and I get to talk a little bit about my job and what my work is. And I get to learn more about these individuals who are involved in these extraordinary events in our history.
I imagine that once a company has you and you've invested time to begin learning this knowledge, that knowledge process never stops. Are you continuing to always brush up on your history and learn more things about the character you're portraying and local history? And just building off of that, I imagine that the better you are at your job and the more you know, the more valuable you become to the company. Is that reflected in any way?
Uh, I would say so. I'm always learning more, and I mean, history is always living and breathing. We're always learning more about the events that led to where we are now. And so I spend a lot of time researching a lot, listening to a lot of firsthand accounts of people who were living at the time that I'm trying to portray. It helps inform my character and my character's relationships with other people. I've read a lot of books about the American Revolution and things like that. And to clarify, that's what my job specifies, or that's where my job is linked to. Is colonial Boston. And so I read a lot about Boston at the time of the early American Revolutionary War efforts, reading books like Defiance of the Patriots, Alan Taylor's colonial histories. There's also a great resource that I tend to look at. There's a book called Past into Present by Stacey Roth. It's all about techniques of historical interpretation. It was given to me by a friend of mine who actually received it from a professor that we both had when she got into the historical interpretation scene. And so that's an invaluable resource in how to communicate with guests and how to deliver this history. And I am always learning more. We have a program where at our museum where we're constantly talking with other historical societies, but also descendants of people who are involved in these historical events, and we get to learn more about their individual connections, and that is what informs my tours.
Something that might scare me from pursuing like this would be the questions. I can prepare a script, of course, and you said it's about 50% scripted and the other half is sort of off the cuff based on perhaps what your audience is leaning towards and what,
Mhm.
and what particular location or season it is even. Um,
Yeah.
how do you I'm sure at this point you know a lot of the standard questions, and after you get asked a question once, you go home and you research it and figure it out. Is that how it works?
Typically, whenever someone asks me a question on site that I don't know the answer to, I write it down and I look it up later. Luckily, we have a research coordinator on site who is able to answer a lot of our questions for us. And if we do have a question, we can redirect them there.
Good,
but
good. That's what I
it
would
is
be worried about. I'd be like, well, what's your deflection technique when someone say, "Oh, I don't know. I'm just a shoemaker. I'm just a cobbler. I
Well,
can't
see
tell."
that is a very easy deflection technique, and sometimes we utilize that, but we also say, "But I can find out, and I will let you know before you leave. I will give
There
you
you
an
go.
answer."
Wonderful.
Yeah, we're always learning more on site, and also working with other cast members because they all have very different characters that they're working with. I tend to play a very well-to-do carriage maker, whereas many other cast members I work with are widowed mothers living in the almshouse, and their perspective is much different from mine. And being able to communicate with them as well, I think, enriches the experience for the audiences.
How much of the character is Justin? Meaning, of course, as an actor, you're using your voice. You probably need to project fairly well to make sure the audience can hear you. You have to have an amount of stage presence to be able to captivate and hold their attention and their imagination. But you're playing a character from the past. Do you, how much of it is Justin? How much naturally your natural persona, and how much are you putting on a specific sort of character?
A lot of the information about the character comes from our genealogical research. The truth is, there is not a lot of biographical information that exists on a lot of the common residents of Boston at the time. There's a lot of information about Samuel Adams, but there's not so much about, let's say, the 150 people who were involved in the Boston Tea Party. Those were all residents of Boston that may not have had a significant impact on later historical events, but they were involved in that. And so the challenge as an interpreter is taking what information we do know about these people and rounding them out into a character that can effectively give the correct and unbiased history of our time. So I would say
Well, of
a
course,
lot.
they're probably biased from their perspective at the time. If they hate, I don't know, King George, is that right? Or whoever. So they are biased in certain ways based on that framework, I suppose, right?
Yes, and it can be difficult to navigate that because obviously a lot of the ideas that we're portraying is very anti-parliamentary, very much seeking the independence and the birth of a new country from the British North American colonies. And so it can be difficult to portray a character that can understand where everyone is coming from because everyone has their own justifications in the context of this event, but also understanding, most of all, where we are coming from as the colonists. And so we have to understand the bigger picture at play.
In terms of the language and the style of the language, if I've watched a production of 1776, it's this early American way of speaking that mimics a bit of British in there. And how much of that do you work into your persona, or do you really try to keep it colloquial and and at a very accessible level to for your everyday communication?
Well, it's been difficult to get out of certain habits of saying certain modern phrases in front of guests. We have studied 18th century vernacular. Instead of hello, we'll usually greet someone with well met or good day. So there are some phrases that we can rely on that will automatically date the language that we are conveying. And then in terms of any affectation to the voice, there is a different way that I carry myself. I studied 18th century portraiture, and there's a different way that I speak. I do throw in some light British accent in there. It's not, I'm not confident enough to maintain a dialect like that for an entirety of a tour multiple times a day. But I do make sure that the vowels are longer, and I ensure to talk to people like this to make it to sort of give it more of a presentational aspect.
I'm curious if you have any sort of gauge of how many other people that are doing this along with you in this industry are actors themselves. Is that usually the walk of life that people come from when they're and is that the most attractive candidate for the job, or do we have other people that come from a more historic background that maybe majored in history in school and this is an avenue they found themselves into?
I tend to find a mix. There are some people who have been in some capacity involved in theater, but may not have made performing arts their main career choice. There are a lot of people who have come in who do have mainly history backgrounds. The good news about the specific place of employment that I work at is that we were told that no in-depth knowledge is necessary before we get the job. They will tell
So
us
that's a
all the
relief.
information.
Whew, weight off your shoulders right there.
Exactly,
Oh, you
exactly.
took me because I have potential. You see that I
Mhm.
have the skills within me. And of course, as an actor, like, well, I can memorize anything. I took a few
Right.
improv classes, and you came in with that attitude, and they saw that.
Yeah, a lot of the interactions that I have with guests obviously are unscripted. It's usually questions, and we spent a month or so going through all of the history that we are going to be conveying and the events that are relevant to our message. And so we end up learning maybe like I have 60 pages of notes on the history that we worked on, and I think I talk about maybe 2 of those pages on my tour. But all of the information that we learned helps inform my character, the context of these historical events, and every so often there is a guest that comes up and says and asks a question about something that I would never even have thought of that is connected to this event, but it is in a certain way because there's such a cause and effect in American history. And so suddenly I'm talking about John Winthrop's fleet in 1630 and how it connects to the establishment of Boston and how that led to this monopoly with tea and this revolutionary effort led by Samuel Adams. And so it's interesting the kind of things that pop up.
Is there a mentor program where you paired up with someone who is more experienced with this when you first came into it?
Mhm. When I first started working there, it was a little bit of a different experience because we were still with dealing with COVID restrictions, and essentially my first time working, my first month or so there, I was standing outside for 8 hours of the day just talking to people and having interactions and conveying history and things like that. And we were given the opportunity to work with, they call them the seasoned veterans. And so I was able to see how do they take these answers or these questions and answer them in a way that is in their character but also effectively answers the question. And I have learned a lot from them and how to keep things historically accurate, but also just how to keep visitors engaged. And so, yes, we did have the opportunity to work with the veterans, but we didn't do that for very long. We they tried to push us out of the nest as quickly as possible.
How long have you been doing this now?
I've been doing it for 2.5 years now.
So you'd probably be considered one of the seasoned veterans at this point.
I am kind of. I'm the male presenting actor that's been present the longest on site.
Wonderful. And have you now in turn had that opportunity to perhaps mentor or guide or calm down the fears of any of the new people that you've seen come into the workplace?
Yeah, one of the most intimidating things of the job is that there is a 10-minute monologue uh, for Samuel Adams, and it happens in every tour. And we do maybe like 20-ish tours a day. And so there is a lot of pressure because that monologue gives you all the context you need before you start your tour. And it also, it's a 10-minute monologue. All the eyes are on you for 10 minutes straight, and you have to stay in character and you have to go along with it. And it's tough, but the best thing about having new people come in is that I, in my confident, seasoned veteran hat, will stand in the
In
pulpit and I will
your tri-corner hat.
my tricorn, exactly. I'm able to work with some of the new hires, the rookies, and I get to share the things that have made things easier for me. What parts of the speech can you just skip over if you're running out of time and you have to get people down to the next part of their tour? How can you adapt things that will make the speech a little bit more engaging, jokes that I sprinkle in there to make sure people are listening and things like that. So it's great to work with them as well because they're also very excited about it. And you're right, it is very nerve wracking when you have something like a 10-minute monologue and then also days where you have to just be improvising all day. And so it's good to be able to calm their concerns.
One of the main things that's probably important for anyone pursuing a parallel career or a side hustle while they still want to continue to act and perform is flexibility. And do you think that this job offers you the flexibility to continue to do shows and rehearsals and take on other projects? If would you be able to leave for a month or two if a big gig came your way?
Speaking from my own personal experience, yes, I've found that it's been very flexible. Since getting the job, I've booked a couple of plays, I've booked a commercial, and I've had to fly other parts of the country and be away for brief periods of time for tech and things like that. And they tend to understand that this job does attract actors and that this is just going to be a part of the demographic of the people that are going to be interpreting for them. And so luckily I am in a place where they are flexible. And I know in the past, I haven't had to leave for extended period of time to do a tour or anything, like a touring production of a show. But there are former cast members who have, and so I know that that opportunity is available to me, and so I never feel like I'm trapped there. Like that's the only acting gig I have. It's a full-time acting gig that provides me with benefits, and I'm extremely grateful for that. But I also know that I am allowed to continue to actively pursue my acting career.
That's fantastic. For someone who's maybe uh, just finished up their BA or BFA program, maybe they're watching this video or they're looking for some alternative route where they can still utilize some of their acting skills. What sort of personality or what sort of training do you think would make this job appealing for a specific person? What sort of temperament is right for this job?
You have to be ready for anything. The people who come in and some of the questions that we are asked are so out of left field, or they are connecting two completely different historical events that have no connection whatsoever. But that's just how they are trying to make sense of what we are doing. And so, if you're going to go into the job of historical interpretation, you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to adapt and be able to um, discuss very complicated topics with a very wide variety of ages. We talk about a lot of very difficult topics, for example, slavery at the museum. And this is something that we have to do with a lot of care and something that we have to do with people with a bunch of different backgrounds whose ideals are not as universal as the colonists are in Boston. And so you have to be willing to be patient with the people who are still being educated by us. And overall, it is just a fun thing to do. I to be completely
If you
honest,
can say that your job is a fun thing to do, that is a bigger check mark than most people can say about their careers. I'm thinking, I'm so I'm just in disbelief every day that I'm at work right now at a community television studio, a place I never dreamed that I would be, using my acting skills and presenting skills and artistic skills. I made this background behind me, and I get to do creative things and I get to conduct interviews about things I'm passionate about every day. There there are jobs out there where you can use your passion and your heart and have a good time doing it. It's really the ultimate dream. And so many people are settled on, it's great to have those dreams of Broadway or of
Mhm.
booking that huge role in that film, but you have to find ways to make yourself happy every day, and you have to find ways to support yourself financially. So bravo to you to finding this niche market, this niche, and exploring it and making it work for you. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. You know, I've always considered myself very lucky to get a full-time acting gig so shortly after graduating from college. And I really don't take it for granted. I revel in the fact that I can put on a tricorn hat and just be silly every day. I get to tell a lot of jokes and make a lot of people laugh, but I also get to educate a lot of people. And at the same time, I'm utilizing my love of performance, and I'm utilizing my other passions, which are for history. You know, I've been researching my own genealogy for 11 years. I've always had an interest in history, and this was just sort of the perfect marriage of that.
It's fantastic. Justin, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Well, that brings us to the end of another fun and hopefully very informative episode of The Artistic Entrepreneur. It was such a pleasure having Justin on the show today, and it just gets me thinking there are just endless possibilities out there for different paths you can take. When he was talking, it popped into my mind that he could do a one-man L. Frank Baum Wizard of Oz show. There's a whole market out there that I call the library circuit, which we'll get into another day, where performers make a great side hustle touring around giving educational speeches, lectures, and performances at libraries. I'm going to have to bring someone in to talk about that soon as well. But I'm very curious what you are doing to succeed in your art, both artistically and financially. So if you have an idea or if you have a profession that lends itself to this great combination of heart and soul, please be in touch and let me know what you're doing and engage with this community of actors and performers who are looking to explore the wonderful career opportunities that are just right outside their window. I'm Ryan, and thanks for watching.